Well, I want to see if you want to agree with this. So Athlon put this, and this is a little longer excerpt, so I'll get the magazine here and read it. But they list programs under pressure. There's win now pressure building at these 5 former football factories. Miami, Texas, Texas A&M, Nebraska, and Florida. Programs under pressure. And I think when you say programs, I won't disagree with it. I do think as a program, Florida is under pressure. That doesn't mean immediate pressure. And they say win now. I don't think Florida's in a win now scenario. Billy Napier's not in a win now scenario. Now, this is Scott Strickland. I do think the program in some ways, they have to hit. They have to nail on Billy Napier for this, the pressure to subside. So I see where they're coming from, but I don't necessarily agree with the win now mentality part of it. But what they say about Florida. The recent theme for the Gators, get a new head coach, start strong, fade away, Wentz, repeat. Florida won the SEC East in each of Jim McElwain's first 2 seasons at the helm, but he was out halfway through the 3rd season after a 3-4 start to turn into a 4-7 finish under interim coach Randy Shannon. Dan Mullen's first 2 seasons as the head man in Gainesville were both 10-win campaigns, but he went 8-4 in 2020 and was ousted after going 5-6 the following season. Billy Napier's tenure began last season with the same 6-7 record from 2021, which might be a positive divergence from that trend, if only because it gives the Gators plenty of room for improvement moving forward. It was a roller coaster year that featured some positive signs: 17-point win at Texas A&M, close losses to rival opponents Tennessee, LSU, and FSU, and ended with an embarrassing 30-3 loss to Oregon State in the Las Vegas Bowl. The rest of the SEC East will be playing for second place behind back-to-back national champion Georgia for the foreseeable future. But the Gators should at least be able to show some progress this season by getting on the right side of 500. Replacing star quarterback Anthony Richardson would be the biggest challenge on offense. And the defense that's returning just 4 starters will also be breaking in a new coordinator. Top 15 recruiting class should help reload the talent on the roster. And outside of Tennessee, it should be a wide open race for the second tier of that side of the conference. If they can weather the personnel changes on both sides of the ball, Napier's Gators could get this train back on the tracks. So a lot of what we already said, Will, of, behind Georgia, it is wide open right there before the SEC East. In this summary, I thought they did a pretty good job of describing the roller coaster of last year, how it did start different for Billy Napier, not getting off to that fast start. There's room for improvement. We know by now, when this summary was written, of course, Florida's recent track record of recruiting hadn't happened yet. So that's going to buy Billy Napier a little bit of time as well. But kind of going back to the original point, Scott Strickland, Billy Napier, it's not a win now mentality, but it is, I will agree, of a program under pressure.
Yeah, I don't know how to take that. I think it's interesting when you look at that whole history and you talk about McElwain and Mullen winning early. But Will Muschamp came in and he didn't really replicate. He replicated exactly what Urban Meyer had in his last year, and that wasn't all great shakes. So I struggle with the idea that this is some make or break year for Napier, just because the recruiting didn't pick up until now. Yep. Right? Like, if his recruiting was sitting where it is, if his recruiting right now is sitting where it was last year, I'd be telling you we're doomed. Right? I mean, that's the reality of it right now. I'd be telling you we're doomed. And what that means, and I've been saying this over and over again, I don't think people believe me when I say it. It's not that I don't believe in Napier's ability to recruit. It's that you now have to be patient because you've seen a second year of recruiting that does not match Nick Saban and did not match the second year of recruiting for Kirby Smart, which means to expect that same meteoric uptick is not a realistic expectation given the level of player that he's brought in. Now, obviously Kentucky and Tennessee and South Carolina and Vanderbilt and Missouri, like, you got to start seeing progress there. but it's not the same model as the guys who've typically won the SEC. I agree with you completely from a Strickland perspective that he's going to have to see this one through, because he's not going to be able to get to pick a new coach if Napier doesn't work out, right? Like, you can build as many facilities as you want. If the football team isn't performing, there's going to be grumbling, and no one's going to care that you made it to the College World Series final, or that the gymnastics team won a national championship if the football team is 5-7 year after year after year.
Well, I brought that up with Andy Staples about a month or so ago. It was like, hey, it's going to need to be patient anyway, just because of this, as you said, cycle of recruiting and the natural progression of recruiting. But Scott Strickland's going to be a little more patient, because his job is riding on this now. Whether the people above him, and this is why, program under pressure. This is why I think that it is true. Are the people above Strickland going to have the same patience and wait on it? Because he's going to have the patience, because I think his job is riding on this.
So I wrote an article last week that looked at recruiting for Napier, and it wasn't just, we got a flurry of 5 or 6 guys, and so we should be happy about it. It was looking at –
go read about it, everybody. It was really good.
There you go. But it was looking at the first 3 years of everybody who's been a head coach at Florida since – Urban Meyer. And what you saw is Urban Meyer started out sort of middle of the pack with his recruiting and then built up, and he's been the best recruiting coach Florida's ever had. But then if you looked at Muschamp, he saw a slight uptick from year 1 to year 2 and then went down in year 3. McElwain did the same thing, a slight uptick in year 2 and then down in year 3. Mullen did the same thing, a slight uptick in year 2 and then down in year 3. Napier has had an uptick from year 1 to year 2, and now he's had an uptick from year 2 to year 3. So when you're looking at just progress in general. So I don't agree with the rinse repeat aspect of what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, Florida has had the same thing happen with McElwain, Muschamp, and Mullen, but the same thing isn't happening with Napier, at least not on the recruiting trail. Now, look, you still got to win, and you still got to go out there and perform, and your players still have to be able to buy in, and you can't go 5-7 in perpetuity. But the idea that, like, I think the Florida fans are smart enough to see what's happening on the recruiting trail and understand that a 5-7 season this year is not the end of the world. But I think they're also smart enough to understand that, based on some of the issues that Florida's had bringing in quarterback recruits, that this is pretty much DJ Lagway or bust.
Yes.
Right? Like, Lagway is going to have to take over, and he's going to have to be good. He's going to have to be good relatively early. And if he's an average SEC quarterback, well, that's probably going to be the time where people start really going, the heat's on Billy Napier. But until DJ Lagway takes a snap, I don't think there's any pressure on Billy Napier, other than just if he can – he can prove some things. I don't know that he's necessarily going to not prove things, unless just the bottom falls out. Obviously, if he goes 1-10, we're having a different conversation. But, 5-7, 6-6, you look at it, you go, but DJ Lagway hasn't taken a snap yet. And that's where he's going to be evaluated. And so the idea that the program is under pressure, the program will be under pressure next year, because there it's going to be, is Lagway ready? And how do you bring Lagway along? And how do you make sure that you don't put Lagway in a situation that's bad for him when you're feeling the pressure now that's building? So maybe you can say
and to take it even further, Will, with that, if the season's not going the way in year 3, if the season's not going the way, can you keep recruiting at that high level to keep buying you some time, or to keep building upon what you did in 24 class?
Well, it's interesting, because we've all been asking how NIL is going to change recruiting, and we're seeing it right now at Miami. Because all of a sudden, their recruiting looks pretty middling, and Florida State, same thing. So that is one thing that Napier's going to have in his quiver of arrows, is that compared to the other guys in state, he actually is doing a pretty good job in terms of bringing guys into the University of Florida. He's also, this class in particular, is a lot of guys from outside of the state.
Yeah,
so if he can close with in-state guys, this recruiting class is going to look really, really, really good.
Yep.
And again, I think there will be some level of patience for that. I don't think, though. Now, here I guess is where I maybe agree a little bit with the assessment, is if he can go 8-4 this year, then even if they took a step back next year with Lagway at quarterback, there would be a level of patience, because look what he can do with Graham Mertz and his guys. We took a step back because Lagway struggled a little bit, but now we got Lagway coming into his sophomore season, and we're ready to go, right? I can see that being the argument. if you go 4-8 or 5-7 this year, and then Lagway struggles next year, well, now the grumblings start to get a little bit louder. So to me, it's not necessarily a patience for this year. It's a, can you build equity so that next year allows you to develop DJ Lagway in a way that makes him an effective quarterback for the program long term? Not everybody comes into a program and is slinging all over the place and is able to immediately be transformational. Lagway has a chance to.
And I still think a bridge transfer quarterback is in the cards. So,
oh, good God, man! No, start Lagway. Just start it, Ben. Like at that point, you're testing my patience.
I'm fine either way. I'm just saying, I'm not gonna throw that out of the window.
I was gonna say this year. You talking about this year?
No. I'm saying instead of starting Lagway his freshman year. Now, don't get me wrong. You have to nail it. You have to get a bridge quarterback that's 1 year, can't miss. You know you're getting somebody.
No, I was asking, can you be talking about this year, Dave?
Can I?
Yeah, can you be? Like that'd be great.
We're early July here. I don't think that's in the cards anymore. But hey, that's what Grant Mertz is supposed to be. Will.
Sure.
Okay. Hey, good. That was a good talk, though. Program under pressure, I can get it. Immediate pressure, no. But I do think there is pressure there. I think when you're at Florida, there's always that pressure when you're not winning. There is some type of pressure, but you're throwing Florida in a group of Miami, Texas A&M, Nebraska. And here's a little sneak stat about that. These teams' most recent final top 5 AP ranking: Texas A&M. 2020, COVID year, we remember that. Florida had to play in that year. So 2020 for Texas A&M. But, man, besides that, most recent final top 5 AP ranking for Texas, 2009. For Florida, 2009. Miami, 2003. Nebraska, 1999. So, these are teams we grew up with dominating college football. And it has been quite some time since they've been among the nation's best in any consistent manner.
Well, so there is something I'll say there, which is that you would have said the exact same thing about Oklahoma right before Bob Stoops took over.
Uh-huh.
You would have said the exact same thing about Miami before Butch Davis took over. You would have said the exact same thing about Georgia before Kirby Smart took over. You would have said the exact same thing about Alabama before Nick Saban took over. And so there's a trend there.
What you're saying is it's cyclical.
Well, not only is it cyclical, but it's incredibly dependent on the head coach. And that's not a coaching ability statement. It's a recruiting statement. It's these guys bring in the best of the best of the best, and those guys come in and just whip everybody else.